Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I will be joined by Andrew Schnitke in just a second. On this episode, we talk about System of a Down, we talk about Boyz II Men, and we talk about separating art from the artist, whether you're a fan or whether you're the band. We get into some fun topics, we get into some not so fun topics. Hope you enjoy. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend about the podcast, tell a friend about the YouTube channel. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going pretty good, Craig. I'm wearing my Jose Ramirez shirt today as we hit the MLB trade deadline, and Guardians are fighting for the top spot in the American League. So I want to show some love and support there. How's it going with you?
It's also going well. I'm wearing a hoodie because I'm in my basement and it's cold. And it's actually kind of comforting to be in the middle of summer in a colder environment where I can justify wearing a hoodie because I kind of feel like this is my natural state.
For sure. If I could wear a hoodie year round, I would happily do that. I am definitely team hoodie. I do have something that will warm you up a little bit, though, and that's some.
I'm hoping.
I'm back home. I've got some new metal poetry for us today to kick off the show. So let me prepared for this first one here. You're gonna like this first one. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. Wake up. Grab a brush and put on a little makeup. Hide your scars to fade away the shakeup.
You wanted to.
You wanted to. I mean, such a classic.
So for those who didn't recognize, that's System of a Down with Chop Suey.
Yeah.
And that is maybe one of my favorite single releases of all time. When that one hit radio prior to Toxicity coming out, that was somebody played it on the radio, somebody recorded it and sent out the MP3, and I listened to that song on a loop for probably 6 or 7 days, where I just obsessively couldn't stop listening to it.
Yeah, that was the song that kind of actually changed me on System of a Down, because I know you liked them prior to that, but I actually didn't really care for them that much. And it was Chop Suey that really just blew my mind, like what they were doing with that song. And then also when I remember, like, I still didn't have the album when I heard Aerials for the first time. And when I heard that song, I was like, the next day, I think I went out and bought the album. Like, I was like, all right, yep, I'm in. So
one of the weirdest bands to become uber famous. In a lot of ways, it still strikes me as crazy that they ended up having a smaller output. I won't say shorter career. Smaller output than a band like Deftones, and a shorter career than Deftones, and yet surpassed them. If they were on a festival, System of a Down would have a larger name on the poster.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, their peak was absolutely massive. I think we talked about that with when we were doing what was that? We did an episode where we were ranking different bands. Oh, the greatest American rock bands of all time, and we talked about that, like the difference between a peak versus a longevity. And System of a Down definitely has that peak. Like, they were just absolutely massive and just beloved. Like, that album was everywhere.
Yeah. And it was a mediocre period in rock music, and certainly mediocre period in alternative rock music, but it was the best of that period. And so even as much as I liked some of those records, I'll admit I liked the first 2 or 3 Stained records. I liked the Korn. I was there. I was in the moment. You had to be there. It's easy to look back on it now and feel embarrassed by it. But System of a Down was best in class at that moment.
Well, you kind of just inadvertently led us into today's second reading.
Oh, here we go.
So here we go. We've got this one predates Chop Suey by a couple years. We've got Feeling Like a Freak on a Leash. You Want to See the Light. And
I was hoping it was going to be some Aaron Lewis. Give me some of that Stained.
Yeah, no, we went the Corn route, but you did mention Corn, and the funny thing is, I didn't
Yeah.
plan this. You know, breaking down the fourth wall here, I did not read the poems that I was going to read prior to literally 2 minutes before we started recording. So I didn't know what today's poems were going to be. But on the way into work this morning, I listened to Follow the Leader, which is just crazy coincidence how that happens, like musical osmosis or something. I think it was just destiny. But I remember Follow the Leader came out my senior year of high school. Or maybe it was even the summer after. I think I had just graduated, and it was another situation where I definitely liked Korn quite a bit. I had both of their first two albums, but I
Yeah.
just remember the Got the Life video, which was the first single off of that. And I was just blown away by the video and the song. And I was so excited to go buy Follow the Leader. And I must have listened to that nonstop all summer. And like I think I'm pretty sure Rancid's self-titled album came out that same summer, because like I've in my head that's like the soundtrack of my post-graduation was that Rancid self-title and Follow the Leader, just listening to those back to back, like nonstop.
One certain. I
How
don't
did you
think we're
feel
going to
about
go
that album, Follow the
Freak on
Leader?
a
Like
Leash. Oh yeah, yeah. Follow the Leader. Yeah. I loved the first half of the record. I thought that was a top heavy record, and so
it
I would
is.
put the CD in my car. I would listen to the first 5 or 6 songs, and then I was out. I was just out.
Yeah, it does get a little you have that Far Side song on the second one, which is, I mean, it's a good song, but like there was just a
Children of the Corn with
not
Ice Cube.
not the same urgency, I would say, in the second half of that album as you had in that first half, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it was the the hits were just so good and so great. I think I was already maybe I was already out on Limp Bizkit by that point. I can't remember the timing of all this stuff, but All in the Family featuring Fred Durst, certainly didn't need to hear Fred Durst on my Corn records.
Yeah,
It was
sure.
it was a weird musical family, which reminds me, this is going to blow your mind. How I tie these two things together. Over the weekend on Saturday, back up at Chautauqua, where I see the most random things ever, I was watching Boys to Men,
Oh, okay.
and so
Yeah.
they spoiler alert, they close with Motown Philly, which was the hit that put them on the map. But in that song, that's the Boys to Men ABC BBD, which is like another Brad creation and Belle Biv DeVoe.
Oh,
So they
right,
had
right,
their own
right.
musical family, very, very different than the Corn stained Limp
Yeah,
Bizkit musical family.
just a little
The
bit.
family values.
And I'm sure that they aren't roasting each other the way Fred and Jonathan did on that song on Follow the Leader, which I'm drawing a blank on what that song was
No.
called. But yeah, so
Yeah. But
yeah,
I gotta say, man, as far as '90s revival goes, Boys to Men still kill. The 3 out of the 4 original members, unfortunately, the fourth member has multiple sclerosis and doesn't
yeah,
perform anymore. But they absolutely killed. They were undeniably talented. I don't know if you even casually listened to it because it was at school dances or something.
yeah.
But I had those records when I was a kid. I used to cover the waterfront.
I
Um,
think that that's probably one of those ones that, like, I know more Boys to Men songs than I think I do. Like Motown Philly comes to mind, and then were they also did that It's So Hard to Say Goodbye. That's Boys to Men, isn't it?
that was the
So that
biggest one. Yeah.
is, so so I certainly can rattle a few songs off the top of my head, but I'm sure if I heard some others, I'd hear it. But like, I do think that a band like Boys to Men, as long as they can do the harmonies, like harmonies are always going to sound good no matter what. Like harmonies are awesome, like regardless of anything else. And when you do harmonies as well as they did, it's always going to sound good.
Yeah, and unlike Frankie Valli, who was lip syncing, these guys were singing their faces off. And who's the lead singer of Boyz II Men? I don't know which one I'd give it to, but Wanye Morris is just such a phenomenal singer. He kills. Yes, I'm the guy who loves Boyz II Men and death metal. It's just how it goes. It's
There we
just how
go.
it goes. But they it was a very Weezer like set. You know, when Weezer plays a festival, they do all their big hits and then they play a couple of really great covers. And they played a Bruno Mars song, a Michael Jackson song, and just to hear those songs in addition to their the best ones from their catalog, it was just a, you know, if I wasn't in a situation where I could just walk down the street and watch it, maybe I don't do it, but it was totally worth it. It was totally fun. Everybody had a great time, and they just absolutely killed. So
Yeah,
that's how I
nice.
tied Boyz II Men into Korn.
There we go. So this is why I like our
All
new
right,
metal poetry, because you just don't know where it's going to lead.
you never have any idea where it's going to go. By the way, the hip hop R&B 90s poetry book would also be just phenomenal.
For sure. For
Maybe
sure.
maybe we should create that one.
There we go.
So one of the topic we're going to talk about today is probably a little bit deeper than the fluff that we started with, the fun and fluff. Um, and you know, you and I did hear about this. We read the same blog sites as IndieCast. They talked about it before we did. But one of the things that's happened in this latest election cycle, when somebody gets chosen to run, people start digging. And so JD Vance was named Trump's VP pick. And all of a sudden, people are looking to see any kind of internet scraps they can find. And somebody found his Spotify account and some of his playlists, including one that had some Death Cab songs. And so former Death Cab guitarist Chris Walla was a little bit dismayed that somebody like JD Vance could enjoy these songs about longing and heartbreak and wanting better for people, and I'm paraphrasing Chris Walla, but
Yeah.
he said it's strange that somebody would have listen to music like that and not have a political agenda to match it. And so you and I had thoughts about that. So I'll kind of let you go first.
Yeah, sure. And I have no problem shouting out IndieCast on this, because we talk about them almost as much as we talk about Pearl Jam. We're big IndieCast fans here. But Stephen Hayden kind of talked on that about, sort of his pet peeve is the way people get sort of possessive and precious about the role of, the political viewpoints of the artist versus the political viewpoints of the politicians, if you will. And, I I think that there was something that I kind of related to in that, because, on the one hand, I certainly can understand where Chris Walla is coming from when you say, you know, well, this kind of bums me out that, we express this through our music and through our art. And this guy who stands for literally the complete opposite of everything we stand for, is somehow identifying with that. And they have trouble understanding that. And I think there's a couple different levels that works on. And like, for where my head went right away was just the fact of something you and I have talked about before. Neither of us are lyrics first guys when it comes to music. We're,
Right.
the lyrics tend to be secondary for us. And I think we are not totally unique in that. Now, there are a lot of people that are lyrics first, and they would probably have a harder time with this, but it's like, if you just like Death Cab's music, like, you can kind of get past whatever it is they're singing about if you're not that focused on what they're actually saying in the lyrics and what the spirit is behind this. And we don't we're not going to get into politics on this podcast, but I have no problems admitting that I grew up in a conservative household in rural Northwest Ohio. Like, so, I grew up with a lot of conservative political ideology. And as I'm growing up, identifying as a Republican and listening to all this, all this punk, hard rock, alternative rock, Pearl Jam, just expressing
You beat
extremely
me to it.
liberal.
I was going to say it's not for you, Andrew.
Yes, and it wasn't for me, I guess. But like
It never was
at
for you.
at the end of the day, like I always felt like, well, crap. Like if I was only going to listen to people that I agreed with, I I mean, who would I even be listening to? I'd be stuck listening to country music, like, and today you could listen to Kid Rock and I'm not sure. Yeah, Kid Rock. I
Ted
mean,
Nugent.
I think what was that band? Oh my gosh, that did that Superman song. I think they're
Three Doors
conservative.
Down.
Three Doors Down. So you got them. You got, and I saw Ted Nugent live maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I'll tell you what, regardless of the politics, he put on a hell of a show. He's definitely an entertainer.
I liked it better when he was in
I'll give
Damn
him that.
Yankees with High Enough.
There we go. But no, so I think for me, I had to sort of separate that out at that age. And I was sort of naive at that age anyways in my viewpoints. I don't think anything was really crystallized me. I was not like somebody who was like all that well informed in my republicanism. It was just kind of something I grew up in. And that was kind
Well,
of,
everybody's kind of born into their politics and their religion to some degree. You're not going to be thoughtful about it at age 9, 10, 11. Those are the same years where we're falling in love with bands on the radio or falling in love with TV shows and movies without any kind of an idea other than this is the way my grandparents and my parents might have done things.
yeah. And I think too, uh,
Which
we're
is
not
obviously a
doing
very different scenario than what JD Vance is in today.
well.
But
And that's kind of what I was getting at. Was I was going to say we're not doing a necessarily an apples to apples comparison here because JD Vance is not in the formative years of his, and to put it into like where my politics are today. If I'm trying to think of, I'm not. I can't really think of a good example of a band I listen to today that expresses right wing opinions.
no, but I've got a good
But
example. I've
yeah, go
got
ahead.
so like Rage Against the Machine is so far out there that they don't align with either political party. I mean, you
Right.
might think that they align with the left and the Democrats, but they
They don't.
don't. They
No.
don't. So if you're a politician of any stripe, and they once upon a time they criticized Paul Ryan for saying he listened to their music when he went to the gym, which is
Hmm.
a joke, by the way. Like everybody listens to Rage Against the Machine when they
Why
go to the gym,
wouldn't you listen? Yeah.
even the people who don't get it at all. And I'm somebody, I like Rage. I've loved Rage for a long time. I feel like I get their politics, but I also don't feel like I'm going to be a revolutionary on the level of those guys. I support their viewpoint without being their viewpoint. And this
Yeah.
idea that you would have to be their viewpoint in order to like the music is kind of bananas. But it's not the first time. Paul Ryan, you've got Paul Ryan and Rage, you've got how many different politicians, and Bruce Springsteen with Born in the USA. But you know
Hmm.
what, like even if you don't understand Born in the USA, it's kind of a kick-ass song.
Yeah. I think didn't Mitt Romney get in trouble too? I think he maybe used a song that somebody got mad about. Now, I will say it is different. I have no problem with an artist saying, "Hey, stop using our song at your rallies," or you're that I understand. What JD Vance, to my knowledge, has not used Death Cab at a rally. That's his personal playlist, and so I'm just speaking about what these guys listen to in their own playlists in their own lives. Like, I just feel like you could be disappointed that you know with their politics and totally disagree with it, but like people are going to listen to what feels good to them, what sounds good to them. And I feel like I'm not looking to musical artists for my guidepost in my politics today. I've got plenty of other places that I go to inform my opinions on these topics. But I could also say it is easier because I do more politically align with most of the music that I listen to today, as opposed to when I was growing up. So it is easier now. I don't have to make any qualifications with myself. But like, I think I don't, unless a band was like, and I guess here I'm going to get more political maybe than I intend to, but like if an artist was like explicitly praising Donald Trump as a great leader and a great man and the moral compass for this country and what we need, like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to that. Like, that's
Depends on how good the tune is.
well, I suppose if Rage Against the Machine suddenly had an about face and was supporting Donald Trump, I mean, Rage Against the Machine is awesome, no matter what. But I don't think we have to worry about them switching sides like that. But I don't know. Like,
So
hey, if we got new Rage music, what does it matter?
I found a list courtesy of Entertainment Weekly. And it's just funny because the first 4 or 5 are all artists against Donald Trump using their songs. So we got Adele, we got Queen. I didn't know Donald Trump used Queen, but We Are the Champions.
I was just gonna say I was in the middle of taking a drink, but I was gonna say it has to be We Are the Champions.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Nickelback versus Donald Trump.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Now Rihanna and Pharrell versus Donald Trump. And now here's a good one. Let's see if you can figure this one out. Explosions in the Sky.
Interesting, because I mean, obviously it's instrumental.
You know where they're from?
Well, they're from Texas, right?
Yeah, that's your hint.
But like it's kind of funny because, like, I don't know how you can get like a political identity either way out of Explosions in the Sky, like, but
it was Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz used the song in a video clip.
Oh, okay.
And now we've got Bruce Springsteen. His Born in the USA. He's got a threefer. He's got Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and Pat Buchanan.
All right. Well, he's got himself kind of stuck in the 80s and early 90s there.
John Mellencamp.
Okay. Not John Cougar Mellencamp.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. He went against Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and John McCain.
Oh, McCain going for the Mellencamp. All right.
All right, oh, this one's good. All right. Finally, this is how we're going to finish. Sting versus George W. Bush and Al Gore.
Huh. So you want to know something interesting about Sting, and I'm going on a tangent here. Wait for this line of following. If you want to experience something interesting. So Sting was a member of the Police. You know who the Police's drummer is? Do you remember?
Stuart Copeland.
Sometime Google who Stuart Copeland's father was, and then combine that with a search of, did the CIA create punk music? And you will go down a rabbit hole that you are not prepared for. I'll just say that. And so maybe we're falling into some politics here, but there's some thought out there that punk music is a factor of a right-wing plant rooted through the CIA. So that's something to catch out. Little rabbit hole there. I wasn't ready for us to go down, but it's just kind of perfect.
I feel like I need to spend
it's way
36 hours on YouTube.
Way too long for us, but there's an excellent YouTube video on this, and I don't know if it's all nonsense or if like there's actually something to it. I don't know, but it's really interesting, and Stuart Copeland's father definitely had an interesting life. So I'm drawing a blank on what his dad's first name is. That's why I
Myles.
Myles. Yeah, Myles
Miles
Copeland.
Copeland Jr., and he was in the CIA
Yeah. And then he also founded
from
IRS Records.
1916 to 1991.
Yeah. And then he founded IRS Records. And they had a lot of influential artists on that IRS label. So, including REM. REM was on some of their early stuff was on IRS. So,
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah.
So one of the things that this kind of leads us to, that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, just as friends who chat, um, separating art from the artist. It comes up a whole lot. I think it's probably always come up, but I think it feels like in this era of internet chatter, it comes up
Yeah.
even more than ever. Um, Obviously, you've got Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, but then there was a time period for a couple months, a couple years ago, where there were some eventually unfounded accusations against Maynard James Keenan of Tool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at some point, it's like I have my own personal relationship with the art, and you've got to make some kind of a decision on whether you're going to keep listening to Michael Jackson or I Believe I Can Fly or
Yeah.
any of those artists. Have you ever stopped listening to an artist because of their actions or something they did?
So, yes, to a degree. And I'll get there in a second. I will answer your question. I did want to mention that in my mind, and this is probably just a factor of my age, I'm sure that there were stories out there and things that people knew. But to me, Michael Jackson feels like the starting point for this. That's like the first time I really remember an artist having this much of a problematic personal life.
Who's the guy who did Rock and Roll Part One, the Stadium Rock song?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Anyway, I'll look it
What?
up while you keep going.
Okay. Um, and like it's one of those things you always kind of wonder, is it just because we live in an information age and this stuff gets around more, or is it a factor of my age and me paying attention to these kind of things more? But like it just felt like after you, like you said, you had the Michael Jackson, R. Kelly was pretty shocking, and it just feels like we've had an avalanche of problematic people in all facets of life, really. Not, we, as sports fans, we certainly deal with that a lot in sports as well. But to answer your question, one of my absolute favorite bands of the 2000s was this really great rock band called Surfer Blood. And I was in love with this band. And their singer got into an altercation with his girlfriend, and it was one of those things where like he was never charged with a crime, but like you could read the police report and it was
Well, let
brutal
me
and it
read
was
it.
ugly.
So
Yeah.
John Paul Pitts was arrested for domestic battery in Lake Worth, Florida. He pled no contest and agreed to complete a court supervised program rather than go to trial, as it
Oh,
would
that's
interfere
right.
with his tour plans. All charges were eventually dropped.
Yeah. And I think like I even my memory's a little hazy with this stuff, but I even think there was even a thing with it where his girlfriend kind of downplayed it a little bit after the fact too, I think. But like I was so devastated by it when I read that police report, because it was just so ugly. And so I did stop listening to them for quite a while. And the only thing that brought them back was their guitarist. And I can't believe I'm going to draw a blank on his name. I feel so bad that I can't remember his name, but he
Is it Tyler
tragically,
Schwartz or Mike McCleary?
no, it's neither of those. He passed away. He tragically
Oh,
passed
it's
away.
Thomas Fakiti.
Yeah,
Faki.
Thomas Fakiti. Uh, he was, I think, like 25 years old and just got a diagnosis of a rare cancer, extraordinarily rare cancer. and passed away, and it kind of brought me back to listening to him because, and this was like my first time of like really weighing this, like, because I'm not a person that was listening to Michael Jackson anyways. I'm not a person who's ever cared about R. Kelly's music. So, it was easy for me to be on my high horse on those, and like, how dare all these hypocrites praise Michael Jackson and still listen to him? Well, it's easy when you're not listening to him. And when the Surfer Blood thing happened, I really felt like I had to put my money where my mouth was on that. But when Thomas passed away, and I was like really contemplating on it, and I was heartbroken for him because he always seemed like such a sweetheart, like just a really great dude. And I just remember thinking, it really sucks because he had nothing to do with what the singer did. And I kind of had to say to myself, like, he wrote really great music on guitar, and like I love the way he played guitar, and like I want to listen to it. And so I just started listening to it again, and it's like I don't have to sit here and sing the praises of Pitts and say, oh, he's a great guy, because I don't know him. But that's not why I'm listening to Surfer Blood. So I will put Surfer Blood on now today, and I just really enjoy listening to the guitars and the songwriting. And it's a band. I saw them a couple times live. Like, I was a huge fan, but it did impact me. So I would say that was probably like the biggest one that impacted me in terms of me having a stance about it, that I felt that I needed to be principled, I suppose. What about you? Have you ever
So
had a situation?
I don't think I've ever completely banned an artist, because my old take on it is, number one, like, I can't, other if a person deserves to get in trouble in the legal system, and I know sometimes people get away with things even when they're not supposed to, like, it's just kind of out of my hands. But what is in my hands is the way that I relate to the music and my ownership of it once it gets into my hands, or my life.
Hmm.
um and so, you, that enters the story as well. And certainly I would say that my interest in certain bands has maybe been a little bit muted. But like, if certain, I'll use Brand New as an example.
Yeah, it's
um
that's an interesting one.
because in a couple, like, they were touring on their, what turns out to be what we think will be their final album, and a bunch of old stories came out about how he had been inappropriate in, I think, mostly internet conversations, however many years prior, the lead singer of Brand New. And so they, canceled the tour. Basically, they were planning on breaking up the band anyway, but they ended it early and kind of walked off into the sunset, in disgrace, I guess, not off into the sunset.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it was hard for me to listen to that last record for a little while. But then, the longer time went on, and it's not like I was buying tickets to their shows tomorrow, and it's not like I was buying a new copy of the new record tomorrow. um it was like, those first couple records or a couple of songs would come on my Spotify. I wasn't going to turn them off. I still love those songs, because at some point I gain ownership of them too. And yeah, I'm paying fractions of a penny of my Spotify fees back to the band and whatever else. But to your
Yeah.
point, there were 5 or 6 guys in that band. I think five guys in that band.
Hmm.
Um, and there are also, I think the other thing is, you don't want to make excuses for any of these people, but you also, I personally always want to find a way for people to get better. Um, and I believe Jesse Lacey is a recovering alcoholic. That's not to excuse any of the bad behavior, but it is just to say that, like, the worst things that people do aren't always necessarily the end of the story. And so you kind of weigh all that stuff, I guess. But in the end, as fans, as people who listen to music, we can't really know and sit and be judge, jury, and whatever else. Executioner is not even appropriate for this
Yeah.
conversation, but I don't know. Maybe that's just a cop out though, because I'm too much of a coward to stop listening to music that I love.
Yeah, I think too, though, like, you know, it feels weird to talk about it in terms of like sliding scales or degrees of, you know,
Yeah.
of, I don't know, whatever you would want to call it. But, like, I think, to use like the most heinous example that I can think of is Lost Prophets. Their singer was, I'm not even going to talk about what he did, but the most heinous thing you could think of. I mean, just truly an evil person. And so in like a situation like that, I think no matter how much you might like Lost Prophets music, which I don't know how much people really did anyways, but like no matter how much you might like them, like I feel like that's a line where you're like, there's just no way you could listen to their music. And like that their music does not exist online. You cannot stream it to my knowledge. Like they have been scrubbed because of this, and you kind of can understand that a little bit. But then you have like other weird situations, like and like to talk about like the fact that like nothing is, no matter how much you might think a band is safe, I just think of like, I think it was just last year that Anti-Flag, like one of the most liberal, like left-wing bands that you would have thought as like pure feminist, like you would have thought there's no way there would ever be anything problematic with Anti-Flag, just based on their politics, their principles, their imagery, and all this and that. And then we found out last year that their singer Justin Sane, he's has a problematic personal life. I always have to be careful. Like, I don't want to throw accusations because I don't know what's alleged versus what's proven. But I mean, it's to the point that literally the next day after the allegations came out, the rest of Anti-Flag put out a statement basically saying the band's done. Like, that was it,
So Anti-Flag abruptly disbanded following multiple rape allegations made against Sane. And then Lost Prophets, the lead singer went to jail for crimes committed against young children.
Yep.
I think we at least have to tell people what the hell we're talking about.
I suppose I hate talking
this
about
is
that.
Horrible though.
The Lost Prophets one, it's just shocking when we talk about young children, like young children. It's shocking and appalling. And so
but by the way, I didn't realize that their music was completely offline. I mean, I'm not saying I'm surprised or that it should be online. I just had no idea.
Yeah, like that's like the most extreme one that I can really think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's been some other like some smaller ones that I might be able to think of, but I just think that like it's so hard because you can identify so much with a band and think that they're on your side and that you are aligned with them, but at the end of the day, we don't know anything about these people. It's a parasocial relationship, that's the nature of fandom and the music that we listen to. And so I'm not saying like you should still necessarily proudly listen to Anti-Flag. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though is like there's how many people got Anti-Flag tattoos and wrapped their identity in this band because they thought they were aligned with them, and to find this out this late into their, I mean, they've been a band for almost, like, I think they might have been certainly 20 years, right? Like, I mean, Anti-Flag's been around forever, maybe even pushing 30 years. And so to find all this out now, it's just like, man, like you just really, it was such an eye opener to me that like nothing is safe in this and nothing is sacred. And so you do have to sort of just decide, like, at the end of the day, how much can I just separate like this music that means something to me? And this is where like I always try to talk about this in a way like to me, I don't view it as a one-to-one imprint. I don't shape my identity based on the identity of these bands. Like, I'll talk about like Henry Rollins is an artist that means the world to me, and his ideology and outlook on life lines up so closely to mine based on what I know about him. But like, I can't, I would never be like a one-to-one copy. I do not live my life by Henry Rollins standards, but he is an influence on my life. And if I found out tomorrow that Henry Rollins was in some way problematic, like, I would stop going and seeing him on his spoken word tours. I wouldn't buy any more of his books. But I can't
But it also doesn't
change.
invalidate the way that you were impacted by the version of Henry Rollins that you knew about, that was presented to you, that you knew at the time.
Exactly.
But the other part of it for me, and the thing that I referenced with Brand New, is that, I also do believe in forgiveness, and I do think that there's some things that people can come back from. Um, one of the ones, it's not music, but one of the ones I always think about is Louis C.K., who did the horrible, where he was pleasuring himself in front of women, and he asked permission, but whatever, that's creepy and weird and awful. And he's a comedian, though, and like there's a certain amount of let me finish that sentence, because that sounds like, but he's a comedian, though, so it's okay. That's not what I'm saying. um I mean, he's a comedian, and a lot of the history of music, the history of comedy, are these kind of people working out their issues, and they're broke in some ways. They're broken people, and they're trying to find to get better through art. Um, and that doesn't make it okay, but it's like, to some degree, we're okay if you're broken because you have a drug problem, because we're used to that and you're only harming yourself. But if you're broken in any other way where there's like a victim, then all of a sudden, like, we have to look at it differently, and we should look at it differently. But then we also have to look and see, well, is that something they could come back from? Is that something, Louis C.K. apologizes unequivocally in the newspapers, takes 2 years off, and then like decides to resume his career. Everybody's got to make a decision for themselves if that's enough, if they want to watch his next special. But then again, yeah, he wins a Grammy for one of his comedy records, and the outrage machine started all over again. And it's fine if you don't forgive Louis C.K. and you don't want to be a fan of his, but then the almost like the campaign to keep him dead in his career seems weird too.
Well, I want to go back to my point about the parasocial relationship in all of this, because as we talk about this, and you and I are both sort of equivocating at times in the way we're talking about this stuff, because we understand that you and I, if we were not recording this with the intention of putting this out there for anybody to listen to, we might have the tone of this conversation would be a little bit different, because you and I know each other.
You know me and I know you.
We're close personal friends. We know our values, and so we understand where each of us is coming from. But the majority of our listeners and our subscribers don't know us on a personal level, so all they know about us is what they hear through this, and they might start to form certain ideas. And I think that same thing can happen with artists, and where to take it back to Louis C.K., we do not really know the work that he's put into bettering himself. So it's hard for us to know, is he a different person now? Has he learned? Has he grown? Has he changed in a meaningful way? We don't necessarily know that. And I think that we run into this issue all the time, where even when people get into arguments on social media, you're arguing with somebody you don't know. They're a totally anonymous person. And it's like, why do you even value that person's point of view to the point of arguing with them? Like, you don't know them, so what difference does it make? And in a case of people arguing back and forth on whether you should go see a Louis C.K. show, like, I think it's just such a personal thing, and everybody should, like you said, needs to decide for themselves based on the information you have about where Louis C.K. is at in his life today. And I think
Well,
when
and
it,
actually, to your earlier point, I'm sorry to interrupt
yeah,
you, but
no,
you were saying, it's very easy for you to come down in judgment on Michael Jackson because you were never really a fan.
yeah,
And that's the advent of social media is like there are all these people who were never fans of any of these bands or Louis C.K. who are like now they want to spout off because it's I'm against this and I don't care who knows it. It's like the easiest stance to take in the world
right.
online.
Yeah,
I'm against sexual misconduct and I don't care who knows it. It's like,
yeah.
okay, I
And
guess.
and I think the thing that people are missing is like, because you could say, oh well, you support, like, let's just say, like, let's use the Surfer Blood example. I'll make it a personal thing for me. So
All right.
now I'm listening to Surfer Blood again. I'm sure there is somebody who knows that story who would say, how could you possibly listen to them? You are a bad person for listening to them. And my thing is, well, you don't know me. You don't know the impact they had on my life before I knew about any of this. Like, that impact is very real. Like, they left an imprint on me in a way that nothing can take that imprint out and take that away from me. And that's where it gets really hard, because it's like, but you can't possibly know that because you don't know me. You're a stranger to me and you're judging me based on this. But for me, it's a personal decision. Like, I'm drawing that line where it, in no way, shape, or form is it a justification of anything anybody did. I'm not saying anything is right, and I'm not saying you should listen to Surfer Blood. If that's something that you just can't get past, and I don't even like the way I said that, but like, if that's something that you just feel is, a point of no return for you, like, I'm not telling you that you're wrong for that opinion, because that's your personal life. But we have all these relationships in life, in all these conversations we have, where there's an imbalance in knowledge, where one side inevitably knows way more or way less about the other. And it's so hard to have just an honest assessment and an honest discussion and a back and forth on where we're going to land on these things, because at the end of the day, that imbalance of knowledge is an imbalance in power. And it just makes it hard to have these kind of conversations in a way that I think is beneficial to us as a society. I absolutely think it's very, very important that we continue to call out bad behavior. I I'm I have no problem with there being consequences for these bands going forward. If a band has to break up because of it, like, I'm not saying like that. I'm not saying that this is cancel culture or anything like that. I'm not saying anything like that. Like, there are consequences for actions in life, and these, a lot of these bands and artists,
Especially some of the most egregious actions like the ones we talked about today.
yeah, and
Nobody's out here saying, but I really love those Subway commercials that Jared Fogle did.
yeah, yeah,
But it's different with art. And once art leaves your hands, you give up a certain level of ownership.
yeah,
And I'm with you, man. I wouldn't judge anybody who stopped listening to so and so because they did the worst thing imaginable. Um, but I'm not going to judge somebody who finds a way to get back to that song because of what that song did for them and their ownership of it. So it's the ultimate fence sitter, man. You do you. You can do it. I'm still gonna try my best to hope that all these people are getting better from whatever made them broken.
mm-hmm.
And certainly the ones doing jail time can stay in jail.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that almost makes it easier.
yes,
If an R. Kelly song comes on and he's incarcerated, it feels a lot less imminent or dangerous, because
yeah,
he's not out in public. But again, that's just another equivocation.
yeah. So, it's a delicate subject. But, I'm glad we can kind of talk about this and try to have a respectful conversation about it. But I just think in all of this, whether it's talking about political ideology, which obviously is a very different thing from the actions that some of these other things that we're talking about, but to me, it's all of a same spirit of, at the end of the day, I really like the way you said, like, when the art is put out into the world, that art becomes communal, and it then is a part of each of us, the end user. It becomes a part of us, and it's not personal to that artist who created it anymore. And how we interpret it and how it impacts us in our lives is deeply personal, and it has a different meaning than what it means to the artist. And that can even happen on things that have nothing to do with anything problematic. Like, you could have, like, I think about a song like Alive, Pearl Jam's Alive. This was a song that was written about a traumatic experience in Ed's childhood, but it has become, as it became a part of the Pearl Jam fan experience and the live show, it is a celebration, an anthemic. I'm still alive. Like, it's a joyous part of their show, but it's talking about this traumatic experience in Ed's life. So that ownership has shifted, and that meaning of that art has really changed from what it was created into what it is processed as today. So that's a perfectly harmless situation of that. Although, I don't know, maybe Ed feels differently. I don't know, but
well, I always use the example of Release. Like, that was my favorite song to play during breakups. Has nothing to do with breakups,
yeah,
but something about the vibe of that song and the way that one made me feel. It made me feel better when I was no longer in relationships.
Yeah. So
you know, and
you interpret it the
I
way
owned it.
Yeah, it becomes a part of the way you process the world, the way
And
you
I
see
even knew that
things.
that's not what the song was about. But
Yeah.
if I could only listen to songs that were literally about breaking up, you know, how that doesn't work. That doesn't work either, you
Yeah.
know. The other, by the way, the last one that I'll talk about, because I am a fan of crazy death metal and acid bath and Cannibal Corpse. I listen to Cannibal Corpse. I listened to a band growing up called Dying Fetus, and like, I didn't co-sign on that horror stuff either. You know, it's like they talk about some of the most brutal, nasty, disgusting things in the world. But it's like a weird art form. It's like watching a horror movie and going, I don't know how you co-sign for all that murder and savagery. Like, it's not, I know it's not the same thing, but it's another art form that, like, you and I couldn't sit here, read out those lyrics into a microphone and co-sign for them.
Yeah.
But in song form, you know, I made a sacrifice and I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, I would say that's to some degree, perhaps even a bit of the Misfits experience. You know, I love the Misfits music. I absolutely love the Misfits, but, like, there's some lyrics that are going for pure shock factor, and you know, they're not. You know, I don't think anybody would accuse Glenn Danzig of being a saint and somebody you would necessarily want to aspire to be like in life. But, you know, he created this art that impacted a lot of people of a certain ideology in a certain way. And I don't think anything ever really will change that. There's an awful lot of Misfits tattoos amongst punks. Like, you will see that tattoo still today on a lot of punks. So, you know, you sort of have to decide for yourself. And like we've said, it's always easier when you don't have any sweat equity into the thing that's been problematic. It's so much easier, you know, to have a principled stance in that case than it is when it's something that meant something very real to you in your life. So,
well, if you're listening to this and you made it this far, it means that Andrew and I didn't get cold feet and we'd actually decide to release this episode.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, do with it what you will.
We're also trying to be sensitive and not get canceled, because we like doing this and we like talking about this stuff, and we don't like when bad things happen to people, even though sometimes it involves our favorite songs.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know,
how weird is that?
Yeah, that's. I think it's just the experience of life. Like, if you you know, you're fortunate enough to live long enough, you're gonna have an experience where, like, because, you know, there's just flawed people out there, and you don't know people are flawed until you find out that they're flawed. You know, and I wish there was some kind of detector we could use to figure out ahead of time before we get invested in these artists to know, like, are they actually good people or not. But until that machine gets invented, you just process it when it happens, and you decide for yourself how you're going to respond to that, and how you're going to move forward with something that might have a very, very personal and very real meaning to you in your life. So,
well, next time, hopefully we can find a less heavy topic.
Yeah.
You want to close out with another new metal poem? Let's do a bonus.
Let's do it. All right. Let's see here. Make sure we got a good one here.
Or you could just do Rollin' again.
I want a really good one here.
Okay.
So I've got a good one here. So this one's a little bit longer, but looking at my own reflection, when suddenly it changes, violently it changes. Oh no, there is no turning back now. You've woken up the demon in me. Get up, come down, or come on, get down with the sickness. So there you go. Little disturbed, to lighten the mood. So,
oh, well, thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate you listening. Make sure you help us out by telling a friend, and making sure they subscribe to this channel as well on YouTube, anywhere they can get podcasts. We appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.